Welcome back to another episode of the Pandemic Job Hunt. This podcast aims to break down key techniques and to uncover the industry secrets to help you stand out in getting a job during this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic we are living in. And I am your host, Andrew Barry. I had the pleasure of interviewing Harris Mahmood for this episode of the Pandemic Job Hunt. He is the National Manager for Talent Attraction at KPMG Digital, which overlooks KPMG Lighthouse, which is the data analytics and AI arm of KPMG. We discussed a wide variety of topics from recruiting during the pandemic, how to best network in this day and age, job hunting in the data science field, as well as the state of data science and data analytics in Canada. Without further ado, let's begin. Hey Harris, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Andrew, how are you?
I am doing well. So Harris, what have you been up to lately?
Lately, working from home,
Mm-hmm.
taking a lot of Zoom and team calls,
Mm-hmm.
doing all of those things. But in general, yeah, just been things kind of drastically changed on the recruitment front, as you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine,
Yeah.
when COVID kind of hit us and took a big pause. And first couple of months into the lockdown were, from a business standpoint, so
Mm-hmm.
unclear that the firm that I work for and just the industry in general, everyone went on
Mm-hmm.
a kind of a pause. And now I'm getting a feeling that we're maybe getting out of the gray clouds, which is promising. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was April or end of March. A lot of tech companies out there just halted their hiring, and there's a lot of uncertainty going on. And I think it scared a lot of people, and a lot of people got laid off. I knew a lot of friends who got laid off, and the first 3 months was a bit bleak. But I think
Yeah.
around July, June, that's when I started seeing posting ticking up. More and more tech companies are posting more position, and it seems like it's getting back to normal. And right now in September and October, I've noticed there's a lot of postings every single week on all kinds of jobs. So it looks pretty good. So I have a question. So at your role at the company you work for, did you stop hiring right away? And was it what was the initial response to the COVID pandemic and the transition to working from home?
Yeah, the second part of your question I can answer first. So the working from home piece for like my employer, and
Mhm,
also like just I think that large technology companies, was fairly that was kind of seamless, because I mean I
mhm,
wasn't working from home 5 days a week, but if I had to, I could, and it wasn't really a big
mhm,
deal, and things were kind of already virtual to
mhm,
an extent, and like meetings and things like that. So that transition wasn't overly complex, I don't think, for me or for
mhm,
the rest of the firm. What I do think was tough is, on a personal level for myself,
mhm.
but also for people to like manage what that looks like, right?
Yeah,
Like all of a sudden you're not just working from home, but like for those that have kids, your kids are at home, and
yeah.
all the other moving pieces were really tricky.
Mhm,
So yeah, that transition from a personal standpoint was okay. I don't have dependents, and like me and my girlfriend live together, and that was a
mhm,
bit tricky, but like we kind of figured out a good operating rhythm. And so that part is that's how that rolled. As far as like stopping hiring completely. So
mhm,
I work for KPMG. So what we ended up doing is, like most other large companies, because it was so unclear. And first, pandemics happen in a
mhm,
century. We don't really have a lot of context in terms of how to like react to something like this.
mhm,
Business was so unclear in terms of, being in consulting, all of your money is tied to clients paying you, as you I'm
mhm,
sure understand. And so when that wasn't clear, and when clients started asking us to, pay later, or like, push out their, if it was net 45, they want to do a net 90 or something. And so that had a direct impact on open roles, right? Because the biggest chunk of a budget for any company is always labor, right? And that's naturally connected to recruitment and talent attraction and all those things. And so took a full pause there, except so we took a full pause, and we sort of got onto a project to like kind of come down to like just our critical roles.
mhm,
And if you're wondering what those critical roles, or what thought went into like defining those,
mhm,
funny enough, all those critical roles ended up being in digital and in technology. So
mhm,
because everyone was virtual, cybersecurity was of highest importance to the
Mm-hmm.
firm, and so
Yeah.
we kind of expanded, the folks we were looking for in, let's say, access management and in
Mm-hmm.
incident response and everything that's cyber related. And so that kind of became more critical for the firm because everyone was virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And the other things kind of followed suit. So any of the more tough to find kind of roles that take us a few months
Mm-hmm.
anyway to attract, those
Mm-hmm.
we kept open, but everything else we kind of shut down and kind of just wanted to see what was out there. And that was
Mm-hmm.
very much what was happening in the industry at that time.
Mm-hmm. So, talking about like trying to find talent, pre pandemic, I remember when I was a job seeker, I used to go to conferences, I used to go to meetups in Toronto in the field I was in or the field I wanted to be in. And these are great ways to like really make a genuine connection with someone else. And now, everything has been shifted online. I've tried and I've attended to some like online conferences and online workshops. But from there, I find sometimes it's much more difficult to create the connection because we reduce that one dimensionality of the interacting with our person. Um, was that a challenge at the beginning, trying to start interacting, getting like a pipeline of talent coming in and
Mm.
interviewing them on the, through Zoom or whatnot, versus like, maybe having them come in house and like talking to someone directly?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? I think that if I was, and I have many friends and colleagues like yourself, I'm sure that were pushed out of the job market or were let go
Mhm,
because of the pandemic, and so um, from that perspective, I can certainly imagine like how that would have been like from a talent
mhm,
standpoint. On the other side, when we're kind of attracting people, the natural impact of a shutdown or lockdown or people being let go is that the number of applicants increases, right?
mhm,
And so because there are more people unemployed and more people out looking for work, or just more
mhm.
people uncertain about job
Yeah.
security, right? We had I wouldn't say there was a big impact to the resumes, like applicants
Mhm,
coming in. I don't necessarily always get into the weeds in terms of like managing
mhm,
applications, but I know that when I did,
mhm,
even during the first lockdown, we didn't see a decrease in the number of applicants. And I think that,
mhm.
that a big part of that was probably people, not just also like there's a certain level of brand awareness around the
Yeah.
firm and attracting talent, but also I think individuals were just more uncertain, right?
Yeah.
Individuals that weren't clearly sure if they would really have the job a month or two down the line were
Mhm,
applying for roles.
mhm,
I will just add, I think the other piece on being, kind of putting my candidate hat on,
mhm,
I think it is really tricky. I get a chance sometimes to sit on like a talking panel, something like this. It's
mhm,
maybe not a podcast for like a group that we work with or a vendor that we work with, and a lot of the stuff there, it's weird because we do a lot of campus hiring and we do
mhm.
like tons of experience hiring, and a lot of that is creating brand awareness, and part of that is being out there and talking to people, right? Like just as much as like you may enjoy going out to a job fair or a career fair or just like a startup networking group or what have you,
Mhm,
people in my role, if they should, or I definitely do. I enjoy being out there and kind of attending
mhm.
those events. So that was a big change. And it's I won't say it's the same. Like it is totally different. Like
Yeah.
like you said, like there's a whole sort of avenue of that in person connection that's been
Mhm,
removed. So I think it is a learning experience. Though people are finding that, at least I am, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'm finding that my virtual meetings are getting better, right?
yeah.
Like the efficiency is getting better. They're not as awkward, and we're just human beings and we're smart machines, and I think that things are slowly getting better, but there's certainly a learning curve.
I agree. Yeah, I remember at the beginning, just trying to get like a virtual coffee chat
Right.
was a lot harder, and you're hesitant.
Right.
And it's also that sometimes the awkward, like at the beginning, is your connection stable, or towards the end when you're trying to say goodbye, it's like end the call, and you kind of see that little lag.
Yeah.
Um,
Should I have my camera on? Should I not have my camera on?
yeah,
All those things, right?
yeah, and like yeah, I guess now I'm a lot more comfortable behind the screen and a lot more comfortable, just talking to people like, through a video chat. And it seems like the technology has improved a little bit to make it work better overall. Um, Also, I believe that when it comes to Zoom calls and stuff, how do you think a candidate should put their best foot forward when it comes to Zoom calls? I mean, let's talk about some actual practical advice you may give to a candidate to put their best foot forward or best face? How would they do that? Because versus like, we're at our homes now, our backgrounds maybe our bedrooms or like a messy living rooms. What advice would you give to a candidate when they're interviewing for a role in an X company and putting their best foot forward and like having like the video on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think, like, and this is just personal preference. Some
Yeah.
other folks in talent will maybe tell you something else. At the end of the day, like, this is something that is unique, but it's impacting everyone, right? Like, working
Yeah.
from home is sort of the standard status quo across like all employers, the whole
Mm-hmm.
market. And so most people, your interviewer is fairly used to at this point interviewing virtually,
Mm-hmm.
and they may have the luxury of having a home where they can get an office space. And
Mm-hmm.
others may be like me, or you have a one bed, one bathroom downtown
Mm-hmm.
Toronto. It's a small space, and I'm sharing it with someone, and so that makes it trickier. And so I go into my calls, and I encourage my hiring managers as well when I'm with them interviewing someone, or if they're doing it on their own, to allow that person just to think from your own perspective. Right, if
Mm-hmm.
someone was interviewing me at this very moment, you may find someone passes by behind me, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe the fire alarm goes off, and
Mm-hmm.
and so I think, and that's happened many times, or
Yeah.
someone has a child and they're just they're crying or they need
Mm-hmm.
something, and so it's really really important now because we're interviewing someone in their home. It's very different than asking someone to come in to like the office, and into the ivory towers or whatever, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's the first thing I will say from like a practical standpoint, because you asked me for practical steps, is to just own the space you're in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's don't apologize too much for your fire alarm going off or some kind of noise outside, because it's not in your control and the other person fully understands it, right? And if they don't understand it, and this might be too harsh, but if they don't understand it, that's just maybe it's not a good fit, because
Mm-hmm.
like at the end of the day, like this is not something that's unique. If my expectation going into the interview is going to be like, you better go and find yourself a quiet space, find this white background, I don't care if your house doesn't have, like they're just
Yeah.
so, you have to have reasonable expectations. And so if I'm a candidate, if I'm advising someone, one is to just remember that this is
Mm-hmm.
impacting everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Two is to ensure that if you're on video,
Mm-hmm.
just treat it like you would if you're in an actual
Mm-hmm.
interview, and that's what I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, even though this is a podcast, like I can't see you, and so
Mm-hmm.
this is just it's important to just treat this like any other conversation, right? Any other coffee chat, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
that's really really important.
Mm-hmm. I like how you said like we have to like really accept and own our space, and I like how you also said that on the other end of things, as a recruiter or hiring manager, you should also be accepting that everyone's in their own homes, and we should be reasonable on that front. Let's talk about trying to make connections, networking. I said before that one avenue of networking that I used to use a lot was going through these conferences or meetups in Toronto for industry specific topics, and I could meet really interesting characters there. And now everything has been shifted online. You connect with people through LinkedIn, possibly Twitter. I find LinkedIn has been a lot more active now more than ever. People are posting all kinds of things from their professional experiences to them sharing stories of them getting laid off, or even just showing their vulnerability
Hmm.
of like going through a tough time during the pandemic. I had a candidate, not a candidate. I had interviewee. I would say a month ago on the podcast, and she said she spent like 5 months looking for a job, applying to like hundreds and hundreds of applications and facing rejection after rejection, and she was very open and honest and very vulnerable, and that garnered like so much attention to it. So I find LinkedIn as a platform has become a lot more human. People are much more willing to share like their more vulnerable, more human side or their failures.
Hmm.
And I also find LinkedIn now is a lot more easier to connect to the other person because everyone's on the platform. I find like my response rates of like me cold messaging someone a lot higher than normally pre-pandemic. So as a candidate and I'm looking for a job, How would you would say one best approach in cold messaging someone on LinkedIn?
Yeah. First off, I think I agree with that. So what's happened as a result of this? I mean, the good, there are many bads, obviously, to the pandemic, and certainly outdo the goods. But the good from a candidate standpoint, and also just from generally a lead generation, sales, if you're someone who does a lot of cold emails or cold calls or what have you, what's definitely changed is that anyone who is working are
Mhm.
definitely on LinkedIn right now, definitely on
Yeah.
their platform, definitely online. And
Mhm.
so if you're going to do a cold message, or if you're going to do a cold call, the chance of that person picking up that Skype call, that Teams call, or their actual
Mhm.
phone are just a lot higher because they're definitely not on the go and they're
Mhm.
definitely not out, right, out and about. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, first things first. I think that obviously LinkedIn has evolved into this kind of massive, ATS plus
Mhm.
candidates or talent platform and all this massive audience. And so LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool. It's only enhanced in terms of its like
Mhm.
ability to connect people. In terms of like how do you connect when you don't have that person to person connection, which is kind of
Yeah.
your question. It's tough, right? And I'm not going to go out and say that hey, like it's made it easier in any way. It is tough, and some may argue that if you're good, if you can present well, and if you're the kind of person that can make a good impression very quickly,
Mhm.
you would for sure be well better suited for an in-person environment than just an online digital application
Yeah.
environment like your friend who applied for many jobs and maybe didn't get a hit till much later. And so that is surely the story, right? So one thing I will say, and you may have heard this before, is like being honest about the actual story, right? So to be able to build a connection with someone, let's say, and recruiters are in an interesting category because like in my job or in my team of recruiters, like our job is to like receive a lot of those inputs, right? So we do
Yeah.
get, you get bombarded with a lot of information and everyone's
Mhm.
kind of like looking. And if you work for a big enough company that people have heard of, they'll definitely,
Mhm.
your reach outs will definitely
Yeah.
be
A
higher,
lot more. Yeah.
a lot more. And so it gets tricky to like, first get through everyone. I'm not going to tell you that, yeah, we go through every single person that
Yeah.
reaches out. That gets trickier because the volume is so much higher and you have a day job outside of
Mhm.
just, greetings and hello and connecting with new people. And so what becomes really important is what becomes crucial from a candidate standpoint is to make sure that you've done some research, right? It's not just
Mhm.
Andrew reaching out to me to say, hey, Harris, I wanted to build a connection with you because I
Mhm.
love KPMG or like I love data and I love, like what you do, right?
Mhm.
And to build a connection with someone, especially given that the environment that you're set up in is
Mhm.
harder than it was before COVID. What do you do? So to build that sort of relationship with someone, first things first is add some context to your message, right?
Mhm.
And if you're going to reach out to me and you've seen that I've been in the industry, let's say 8 or 10 years, and you know where I went to school, or you've just have a little bit more of that
Mhm.
warmth in your message, right? And
Yeah.
I think that is doesn't happen often. You'd be surprised, right? A
Mhm.
lot of people will just hit connect on LinkedIn and want to just be on your followers list or whatever it is,
Mhm.
right? But not really reach out, right?
Yeah.
One is that. The second thing I will say is that if I'm interested in company A, and that's the company that I want to work for, and I have kind of looked, and LinkedIn provides like I don't even think you would have to go beyond LinkedIn at this point because
Mhm.
everything is there, right?
Mhm.
And they've enhanced the tool so much now in the last even 6 months that you can literally not have to go anywhere beyond that. So do your research, find out who this person is. If I'm going to be interested in company A, like I said, I'll go and find out who all the folks are in,
Mhm.
let's say it's company A and I'm a software engineer and I want to go and work in this certain kind of area. I'll
Mhm.
find out who the talent attraction manager or who the recruiters are for that group, right?
Mhm.
You can go and see how you're connected to that person. It's a lot easier than it was before, right?
Mhm.
Reach out to like decision makers directly. That's always a best practice, right?
Mhm.
Build a relationship with a development manager, right? Or if
Mhm.
you're in data science, maybe it's the data science lead or whoever that might be, right? And so reaching out to hiring managers, reaching out to decision makers, reaching out to talent,
Mhm.
reaching out to HR business partners. They're very,
Mhm.
very integral to the whole team.
Mhm.
And then when you do reach out, have a semblance of like have a more nuanced approach, I guess is what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say, right? Like if you give me some reference to
Mhm.
where we had a conversation or a reference to maybe you heard me on a panel or maybe you
Mhm.
heard me on a podcast, like
Mhm.
those things make a message warmer in this
Mhm.
world that is harder for a candidate, right? I'm
Yeah.
not going to say it's easier
Mhm.
today than it was when it was in person.
So I had a guest on the other day, and he's a hiring manager, and he for a startup, and he posted a job posting online for like a data analyst position, I believe. And he said when you post online, you get like 1,000 applications within a span of a week. However, he said of 1,000 of those applications, only 5 to 10 people reached out to him on LinkedIn to
Mm,
build that connection.
mhm,
And he's like the only one going through this. He works for a smaller company, and he said he kind of ignored all the inbound resumes because he didn't have time to go through all that. However, he was able to find time to really look through the people who actually reached out to him. So he said that it's so important to build that connection, because especially now, and you've mentioned it, like more and more applicants are out there. Sometimes I see a job posting go up on LinkedIn within like 2 days. I see like 500 application plus for that
right,
one job posting. And obviously for smaller companies, it's much more, I guess, tougher to kind of go through everything versus maybe a larger company like KPMG, where they have the resources and people to actually maybe go through every single resume. However, I think it's still so important to really make that connection. Okay, so I have a question. What is a strategy for a job seeker, say for like a data analyst like me? Um, should I reach out to the recruiter versus should I reach out to the hiring manager or maybe someone on the team? Because I think there's different strategies for each one of them. And I talked
mhm,
to another person before, and he said, and he used to work at HR, and he said, from an standpoint, when you are a recruiter and someone's reaching out to you, they're only looking at you if you are, say, qualified based on like whatever, maybe your LinkedIn or your resume, and you might have a better bet if you reach out to someone on the team and they get to refer you, because when
mhm.
they refer you, they have the bonus and whatnot. And maybe can you share me some of your thoughts on that in terms of like strategies on the different types of people to reach out in a company like, say, KPMG?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll talk about the employer, like my firm that I work for, but also just in general, I think that it's important for people like they might find this useful. So I
Mhm.
agree with what you're saying. So your earlier example of your the other person who was on the podcast that we're talking
Mhm.
about the first 10 people that reached out, or 5 people that reached out to them on LinkedIn. So just on that note, I think that's really important. So I've been a job applicant, right, and I've been like on the other end of it, and I
Mhm.
think that is it's not talked about enough. So I remember when I was going out and applying for jobs, one of
Mhm.
the first things I would do, like applying for like, putting a resume together, and everyone already has a resume. You may edit a cover letter a little bit. Really, it's not. You go on LinkedIn; it's so easy to apply, and most people will apply. Even passive seekers will just apply for a job
Mhm.
to see what happens, right? And so, yes, the number of applicants and just the total pool is usually fairly high unless you're looking for a very tough to fill kind of position. So um, what I'm saying is having been on that side, like when I was applying for jobs, I would always think of how can I, beyond kind of what LinkedIn is telling me that, oh, you have a second or third degree connection with this person. How can I, like within my own network tree, how can I connect with somebody at Salesforce, or how can I connect with somebody at Facebook or Twitter or KPMG, wherever it is that I'm trying to go, right? And
Mhm.
so that approach is really really important. Yes, absolutely, reach out to the hiring manager and try to build a connection, and use some of those tactics of having done your research and have a warmer message and reference something, but use your network and the power of your network, whether it's friends or friends or friends, to see if you can get a referral. And
Mhm.
getting a referral is, it's easier said than done, because if someone is going to refer you, that's they're kind of putting a stamp on your resume, right, and saying that, hey, my employer that I work for, I'm going to kind of, my reputation is kind of on the line if I'm going to say that this person's a referral. So if I get a message from someone that says, please refer me for this job, chances are I'm not going to do that because I don't know the person, right?
Mhm.
But if I've had, person A and B, contact me and say, talk to this candidate, I think, they might be good for a role that you have now or down the line, or they're interested in the kind of work you do. that creates a warmer connection with that person. I
Mhm.
am more likely, or that other person is more likely to refer them into a job
Mhm.
if I've kind of built that initial connection with them, or there's some semblance of how that person is coming through to me, right? And
Mhm.
so I'll give you an example. If someone is applying for a role, you use an example of a data analyst. So let's say that someone is applying for a role as a data analyst, and
Mhm.
they reached out to the hiring manager and they said, I graduated from this program. I saw this job was posted 2 or 3 months ago. It's no longer posted, but I just wanted to reach out to you and say that this is the kind of work I do. I would love some time to talk to you,
Mhm.
right? Chances are, in today's world, like if you have the right kind of experience, obviously first make sure that you're qualified for that kind of job. But
Mhm.
if chances are in today's world, given that everything's virtual, people don't really have a lot of this kind of
Mhm.
strangers getting on the phone together. It's not happening as much, right? Like I'm not
Mhm.
running into strangers on the street, right? So people are more open to having phone conversations and video conversations. So reaching out to them and sort of not just saying that I'm interested in the job, but reaching out to build a relationship with
Mhm.
someone is really really important, right? There's no role posted today, but you've done your research, so you know that
Mhm.
a role was posted 3 months ago, and chances are they're going to post one eventually again as well, right?
Mhm.
And so I think those things are really really important.
Okay. So you said, one, think about the idea of just trying to build a genuine connection. Don't really expect much from the other person. However, just have them, I guess, be on your mind. So whenever in the future there's a role opening, you can go back to them. You've already established that line of connection before, and they remember you. It's a lot higher. There's a higher chance for them to, one, maybe refer you and or have you go through that interview process,
Mm-hmm,
essentially.
mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I will add is that idea, right? Of like, I post a role, I get 200 applicants, right?
Hmm.
But only 4 or 5 of me reached out to me separately
Hmm.
on LinkedIn. That is true. So I can guarantee that that absolutely happens every time. And I would agree with that other person that those 4 or 5 will always kind of stay in your mind
Hmm.
because they reached out to you separately and you got
Yeah.
it, on your LinkedIn, and there's just how memory works. They just kind of stand out. You've
Hmm.
seen their face on LinkedIn and you
Hmm.
just know, right? And so I do agree with that. What I will say is that most firms, maybe small ones, have a tougher time with this, but most firms with a robust kind of recruitment setup,
Hmm.
um, I mean, I can assure you that we do that for sure. But you have to go through all of your applicants. Absolutely, I
Hmm.
don't disagree with the fact
Hmm.
that if Andrew reached out to me on LinkedIn separately, that he will certainly stay in my mind.
Hmm.
But I will also still go through the rest of the 100
Hmm.
candidates, 200 candidates, because people are just different and you never know what kind of candidates in there. So, I mean,
Hmm.
definitely still apply, but I highly encourage people to also reach out individually.
Hmm. So people who are, say, out of a job now and say they're unemployed for some time, maybe due to the pandemic, or maybe they're transitioning into a new role. I think you can speak more for like a data science, data analytics standpoint. How can one person show that they're still active in the field or they're still refining their knowledge, even though they've been out of a job or they don't have like a formal title? For example, I guess in data science, one thing they could do is like work on portfolio projects or maybe contribute to towards data science on Medium, articles on whatever data science articles they want to write. Yeah, what advice do you have to those folks who are out of a job now, however they want to get into X position? What can they do in the meantime while they're job searching to kind of showcase, oh, they're active, they're looking, they're being proactive with the field?
Yeah, and it's hard, right? Because a lot of the times, the things that I'm going to talk about, which is like, taking on additional learnings and, doing certifications
Mhm.
and, going and, getting some kind of like data science blog going or a
Mhm.
podcast or what have you on Medium or any other platform. Those things are individuals that are, it's easy to say that when I'm in a position where I'm certainly grateful that I'm hired, like I have a full
Mhm.
time job and I'm not, sort of in the job market. It is easy to say that, but And I certainly empathize with individuals that will can push back and say, well, I don't have the kind of time to be able
Mhm.
to do that because I need to go out and earn money. So that's
Yeah.
surely a reality. So I want to keep that in mind before I say this. But purely on the talent recruitment, whether it's data science and analytics, whether it is UX research and UX design, whatever
Mhm.
the tech sort of umbrella is, it is super super important to right now in this time, if you find yourself to have the luxury of extra time
Mhm.
when you are applying for jobs or what have you, to be able to take on extra things. So individuals that in the we were talking earlier about how the job market's kind of picking up, especially in tech, and we're finding a lot of roles posted for everything from development to engineering and so
Mhm.
on. People that there's two kind of candidates, or I guess three kinds of candidates you're seeing, right? One is the same kind of candidate you would have seen before the pandemic, who's kind of good progression, has been in a job for a while, is just applying for this job under
Mhm.
me because it's a good time to make a move, right? The other kind
Mhm.
of candidate can be someone who has unfortunately been impacted by the pandemic, has lost their job, and is now kind of just applying and looking for work, right?
Mhm.
And they may have that gap of like 4, 5, 6, 7 months where they were
Mhm.
let go in March and now it's almost end of the year and they haven't worked, right? And that's all you see on the resume. The last position ended March 2020, and since then it's kind of there's nothing there.
Mhm.
And the third kind of candidate is the person who I would probably put at the top, right? Is the individual that has, again, with that luxury of time and
Mhm.
finance, right? That is really important. But the third kind of candidate that really is at the top echelon is an individual who was maybe let go in March, right? And
Mhm.
has since then, if you're a data engineer, maybe you've taken on an AWS certification to like get more like nuanced understanding of how
Mhm.
cloud works and how engineering really works, right?
Mhm.
You may be an individual that has taken on, if you're a UX designer that was let go, maybe you started getting really hands-on into like research and understanding how like forums, research forums work, or so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So um, I guess what I'm trying to say is that from a talent perspective and also from a hiring manager perspective, because I get an opportunity to get involved quite a bit in hiring manager conversations and feedback on candidates, or individuals that have what have you done when adversity hit you, right? And so when it
Mhm.
was really really tough, did you react by making no change at all, or did you react by realizing that the dynamics of this landscape are fully changing, and so as a result of that, I must change and adapt as well. And
Mhm.
that change means that if I have some extra time, if I've been fortunate to be a Canadian and I have, CERB checks coming in and what have you,
Mhm.
maybe I'll take this time to make sure that, yeah, everything else that's super important is taken care of, but I
Mhm.
take on additional learnings. And so
Mhm.
if you're looking for like specific things that people should take on while they're unemployed, I can certainly tell you that there are many, like, it's you could I don't want to bucket anyone and say that you should definitely do this one certification,
Yeah.
and if you have that and you apply for a job, you're in the top. I don't want to say that, and the reason I stop myself from saying that is because it really limits the candidate, right? An individual who applies for a data analyst job or a data scientist job and has the right qualifications,
Mhm.
maybe graduated from a good degree or diploma program, has been able to show really good models that they have created, and they can really talk at length about putting something from POC till the end on their
Mhm.
resume. Those things are phenomenal. And then I see that, okay, this person got let go in March of 2020, and since then, they've written some phenomenal blogs on
Mhm.
how the pandemic job hunt, for example, or they've
Yeah.
done some phenomenal work on how to create a really great algorithm, for example, or how to write really good code, or so I think it's what I'm trying to say is that it's really important to be able to articulate and showcase all of the additional things that you did
Mhm.
when this kind of once in a lifetime event hit you, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and I was thinking about like what you said about trying to make use of your time, because at the end of the day, I find that when I was job searching, there's only so much hours a day you can put job searching. It's tough. It's demoralizing at times. It can get really boring at times. I think it's quite important that while you job search, you should also find time to, if you have like the privilege to do so, to do these extra side projects that showcases your skills. But speaking of side projects, say within data science or even in tech in general, I talked to another hiring manager once, and he said that he doesn't really care if someone, did a certificate and posted on, LinkedIn or whatnot, because he feels like everyone can go through a basic SQL certificate or basic Python certificate. When it comes to like these projects, he wants to see those certificates applied. One example he used was uh, somebody can, especially say during the pandemic, go out to like local restaurants and ask for their data and see if you can like come up with like some data analytical report for them in order for them to help that restaurant maybe identify certain key menu items that are booming during this pandemic. Thinking outside the box where you actually apply your skills to say like a more real life example, like have a product out of it. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like that is it's a really good note. I think that what's
Hmm.
important here to keep in mind that that is hard to do, right? What we're asking
Yeah.
for here is for everyone to be highly innovative in a once in a lifetime
Hmm.
event, right? So I will agree with that, but I will also say that that is probably not the norm, right?
Hmm.
I knew people in the neighborhood and who were like myself, we have a lot of in the area that I live in. There are a lot of like small restaurants and small
Hmm.
businesses, and so if you are fortunate and you have the ability to be able to go out and help support, or in my building, there are a lot of people that are elderly, and so being able to support if
Hmm.
they need to go out and grab groceries, and that's a more simple, non-technical example, like
Hmm.
versus building out a dashboard that can help maybe a business
Hmm.
become more efficient. So these are I don't think that that is as common as one would like it to be, but
Hmm.
I think it's kind of connected to what I was talking about earlier, is that if someone can show that 6 months of unemployment, what they did during those 6 months of unemployment. If you did a Python certification and
Hmm.
you work for a bank, and if that's great, but how does that, I guess, help or facilitate
Hmm.
your own career, and how did that
Hmm.
so I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't necessarily have to be how did you apply it within these 6 months? How
Hmm.
did you you got a Python certification, and so what
Hmm.
did you go and program in these 6 months that you were able
Hmm.
to help? It doesn't necessarily have to be that. I mean, that would be great, and that candidate would definitely stand out. But I will take a step back and I'll say that even if someone can show me and explain it to me and walk me through the why, right?
Hmm.
So if I were to tell you, Andrew, like I've been unemployed for 6 months, and I come from talent, and like my background's kind of like in talent and technology, and I'm really passionate about digital transformation, and so you're like, oh wow, so like but in 6 months that I was unemployed, I decided to go on and really get hands on with CSS, HTML, and JavaScript because I'm
Hmm.
super passionate about bringing front end design and development.
Hmm.
As a hiring manager, you may be curious, but you may not fully understand why I would do that, because I've
Hmm.
just been talking about how passionate I am about talent and recruitment. And so, yes, it has to connect, it has to make sense,
Hmm.
but we won't always, I feel, find candidates that have been able to put that to use within this short 6 month period of time, right? So if you're
Hmm.
taking on some new learnings and you can tell me why you chose to do that,
Hmm.
I'll put a lot of value to that, regardless of if you're
Hmm.
able to put that to use or
So it's just as important to have a solid why, and I guess when if you're creating some sort of product with the skills you learned, that product is intuitive for someone to kind of like jump in, look at it real quickly, be like, oh, I see what you did there. So let's maybe transition this to a more data science, data analytics career talk right now, since you've been in this field. Um, I would say data science in general has exploded the past 3-4 years. There are boot camps popping up around Canada and like United States with data science programs. And what can you say right now, maybe a higher level of like the data science industry in Canada specifically, and like how has the pandemic affected that? Has it maybe sped up the data science industry or grow, or like what is it?
not. Yeah, I mean, I think that data analytics in Canada, and also just technology as an industry in Canada in the last, I would say, data analytics is still fairly new, but tech in general in Canada has exploded. Not just because we've the federal government done some really, really great things in directing money in the right direction. We're fortunate that we have an educated population, and so like technology is really, really blown
Mm-hmm.
up, right? Data analytics in very specifically in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
we're if you look at it from a higher level, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what you were asking. I see the economy, the Canadian economy, that has primarily been one that has been agro based. We export a lot of raw material.
Mm-hmm.
We export a lot of agriculture, a lot of wood and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I see that as an industry, as an economy, completely changing, not right away because it's so huge,
Mm-hmm.
but over the next 5 to 10 years towards
Mm-hmm.
completely, just tech focus, where we can be in a situation where we can be one of the largest technology hubs in the
Mm-hmm.
world. I'll give you a number, and this will give you some perspective, maybe on or your listeners some perspective on what things are looking like. So we did this research 2 years ago that talked about the shortage of technical talent in the Canadian market,
Mm-hmm.
specific just to data analytics, data science, data engineering, right? And this includes people that are basic Python programmers all the way up to
Mm-hmm.
like cloud engineers, right? That are like public cloud, private cloud, all that. The shortage in the Canadian market in 2021 is something like 100,000 people
Mm-hmm.
just from a shortage. Like these are people that don't
Wow.
exist in the country, right? Like we don't have those people. The
Mm-hmm.
universities are not producing graduates at the speed at which employers are asking them to, right? And so what does that mean? And the total shortage they talked about was 200,000. The
Yeah.
200,000, I gave you the 100,000 number because 100 is just in data analytics. The
Mm-hmm.
other 100 includes software developers, software engineers,
Mm-hmm.
software architects, all of
Mm-hmm.
that other stuff, right? And so when I look at that, right, it can be concerning that we're kind of the innovation is kind of stifled.
Mm-hmm.
If a company like Shopify wants to hire 1,000 people, where is it going to hire those people from?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the government kind of saw that too, and their response to that with something that was launched 2 years ago called the Global Talent Stream, as
Mm-hmm.
well as some of the things that are happening in the world that are leading to global talent being attracted to Canada,
Mm-hmm.
are all very, very positive steps.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to answer your question in a really long way, I think that the data analytics industry and data science and engineering, but also technology in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
is rapidly growing. And so right now, if you look at what's happening in the industry as a result of the pandemic and the economic slowdown,
Mm-hmm.
the only companies that have really still seen a rapid growth or a very quick return to
Mm-hmm.
not just their revenue but also their hiring and also their pace to innovate
Mm-hmm.
or technology companies,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of people they're hiring for. That like in Canada, the biggest employers on the corporate side are the banks, so the big five
Mm-hmm.
banks, and most of them have. If you look into it, and even if your listeners look into it, most of them have very aggressive targets to build out their data science
Mm-hmm.
divisions. That is the reason why you'll find many small colleges and programs that have kind of set up, and really good ones that have a very good reputation, that are churning out a lot of graduates at a
Mm-hmm.
very fast pace, because people have realized that there are two answers to this shortage in the data analytics field and the technology field. One answer is to be more have more of an immigrant friendly culture, which we already kind of do, but to
Mm-hmm.
set up something like the Global Talent Stream, which was set up in 2017 to attract that kind of talent. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
answer. The other answer is either all the universities start producing more graduates, which can't happen because everyone has a 3 or 4 year degree, or we realize there are people that are non-technical. Let's say someone like myself who's not an engineer that
Mm-hmm.
realizes that, hey, like how do I become a full stack developer? How do I become a
Mm-hmm.
data analyst? Is to do those pivot programs that allow
Mm-hmm.
people to shift their careers. Those two things are newer, and you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned one of them, but they are definitely part of the answer
Mm-hmm.
to continuing this innovation.
Yeah, I think I read a stat some time ago that I think Canada currently, under the current government, attracts. I guess they want to. Their target for immigrants are around 300 to 400,000 people a year to move to this country, and so it's a really huge brain gain
Mm-hmm.
for Canada, which is actually good for Canada. But let's talk about the people who are. Obviously, I've also noticed different universities in Canada have all these new master programs, churning out business analysts or churning out data scientists. For example, I think Queens has like a master of management of AI. And I had a friend who went through the program, and she told me is very tech focused, but it's also very management focused. And I think Western has our new program up and coming too. So I guess that's one avenue of churning out more students. But like you said, is a very limited amount of people per year. What about the people who go through these boot camps? And like you said, there's a bunch of shortages in the tech workforce, and not everyone comes with a PhD background or a master's background who is much easier for them to go into a data science career track. Because for
Right.
example, PhD, we all do just they just do research. They're working with R. They're very familiar with these advanced statistical concepts. What do you say to those folks who are transitioning, who decide to do a career pivot into
Yeah.
the field?
Into the field. Yeah, no. So a couple of programs that you mentioned, the Queen's one, the MMEI, but also the MMA that's been around for a little
Mhm.
bit longer. A few others that all the big universities have, and the smaller ones too. I mean, I highly encourage individuals to do those programs, and I'll tell you why.
Mhm.
Because I mean, these are different, certainly different than the other ones that are more of those colleges or those sort of programs that are set up that are kind of pivot programs. These
Mhm.
are university degrees that we're talking about now. So certainly a bit different in terms of how they're structured, but I recommend them because for two reasons. And I'll kind of connect what you were saying about PhDs and fellows earlier to this answer. So, in an ideal scenario, right? You can attract the best kind of candidates and the best kind of people for the industry in technology are those people that are technical enough to be able to get hands on with code and that's your gig. That's great. If you're more of a data engineer, then maybe being able to do all those ETL tasks, that's your
Mhm.
hands on work, right? An ideal candidate is always someone who has that hands-on
Mhm.
capability and is also a great business professional, which something
Mhm.
like that MMAI or that MMA will teach you. Those
Mhm.
degrees, the MMA, for example, the Masters of Management Analytics, is not an incredibly deep technical degree, right? The
Mhm.
people who end up doing the best are those that are coming from a comp sci or more of like that STEM background. But
Mhm.
those degrees are really popular because they can take a deep technical person, a deep technical undergraduate person, and seamlessly kind of move them into that really sweet spot of business and technical. And
Mhm.
so that's why those degrees are really, really great, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's Queens or U of T or Waterloo or Ivy, wherever that is. And
Mhm.
so I would say that I highly encourage anyone to be able to do that, right?
Mhm.
It is for the technical side, for someone who is coming from a PhD program in, let's say, physics, or coming from an applied mathematics background. Naturally, I agree with you. They are well suited for, or better suited, one can say, for a career in data science or data engineering, right? That's a given. They kind of think logic, they think mathematics, they think equations, so it makes sense, right? What I will say though is a lot of those people are coming into the industry not really having, like, no one's teaching you Python in an applied math degree, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of really foundational core, right?
Mhm.
R, yes, a lot more popular, but even those people that are coming from purely more academic backgrounds, someone who's recently done a PhD in, let's
Mhm.
say, applied psychology, that person is also just as well suited for a
Mhm.
career in data science as someone who did a PhD in physics. And I say that because those individuals, more often than not, and we're finding this is kind of the cusp of edge of innovation now, where I'm finding that there are also colleges and those kind of not pivot, but like those sort of hands-on technical programs being set up just for fellows. So if you're a
Mhm.
fellow who's graduated from a PhD, let's say in applied psychology, there are programs being put in place by Canadians and or folks in the US that will get you hands-on with some of the more technological tools, like Python,
Mhm.
that is maybe not taught as part of a PhD program. So it's kind of a bit of both, but I would
Mhm.
just to sort of end this answer to this question, I would say that there's no perfect path, right?
Mhm.
The PhD and stuff will really set you up for a good technical career, but it's not a
Mhm.
perfect path. The
Mhm.
super business focused stuff is great, but it doesn't really set you up for that sort of sweet spot, right? And so, if in an ideal scenario, the best candidates in the market are those individuals that have the technical capabilities to get hands on, have been able to pick up those skills because they went to school or did some programs, but that business side is really, really important, especially if you're going to try and grow your career in the first 5, 10 years, right?
Mhm. So you've mentioned that data science And I think you kind of hint that there's a business aspect of data science. Um, in my opinion, one reason why I was so intrigued by data science, I had a little taste of it when I was in university. But I went to like a business school in university, so I didn't really have much of a technical hands-on experience of the pure coding and whatnot. So, which is one of the reasons why I went through like a pivot program. I went through boot camp to learn at least the foundations of these technical skills like Python. So, in my opinion, when I looked at data science, I thought it was the perfect intersection between like pure tech of like a full stack developer, full software developer, versus like someone who's like a pure non technical role or like a business role. Because one, yes, you are still using these tools, these Python tools, SQL, R, and you're at the end of the day, these tools are these languages are easy to pick up. But the harder aspect of data science is when you create these models, you evaluate them, is the decision making process of like why we do this, why do we do that. That's just the statistical aspect of data science. So for me, I find it the perfect intersection. But however, I've been hearing and been talking to a lot of people. Some people say data science is more leaning to CS versus business, and some people say it's more business versus CS. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I mean, I can give you sort of the like my perspective on it. Obviously, it's the reason why I talk about that sort of happy medium, right,
Mm,
is because I truly feel, and I can tell you that from a hiring standpoint, a lot of the hiring managers, at least where I work, and
mm,
I would probably say that most of the industry, the reason you're always looking, especially in the world of consulting, the reason
mhm,
that CS piece and that business piece is important is because in whether you're someone with an entrepreneurial spirit or if you're working in consulting or if you're someone who is just looking to like start your career,
mhm,
right? The reason why it's important is to give you an example. If you've got more of that business piece and you can go and accompany a senior person, a head of data science, right?
mhm,
Someone who's very technical, comes from a super technical background, has obviously gained a lot of business expertise. You can go on a meeting with that person, right,
mhm,
to a client, to a big or small client, and you can uncover and do a really good intake session where you kind of gather those requirements and you can understand what the problem is without getting too technical, right?
mhm,
Sales is not really talked about as much
mhm,
because someone who's a data scientist will not necessarily think of sales as sales, but sales is a core component of every company, right?
mhm,
If you have the ability as a good data scientist to go on a meeting with your partner or with your manager and be able to get into that meeting and understand and uncover the why of what the business problems are. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do with your technical solution is to answer that why, right? You're
mhm,
trying to answer, you're going to build a model that answers a lot of those questions around, whatever the problem is. But for that first piece to happen, right, you have to have a really good understanding of business, and those skills are harder to define. Soft skills are always harder to define, right? It's not really writing some good code. And
mhm,
so being able to uncover what a problem is by asking the right questions,
mhm,
right? And so those things, I don't ever say that it's a business or a CS. Like certainly
mhm,
you'll find that more people in the industry are coming from computer science backgrounds for sure.
mhm,
But that business piece is the reason I emphasize that so much is because for you to be really successful, again, within those kind of umbrellas, right? So we're
mhm,
thinking consulting, we're thinking entrepreneurial, or just people who are earlier on in their career,
mhm,
right? They don't want to get pigeonholed into one kind of work, right?
mhm,
Is to have a really good balance between the two. And if you're a new sort of graduate looking to get into the industry, or
mhm,
if you just got a new job, try to get exposed as much as you can to client work, to being on
mhm,
meetings, to be on business calls, because it's going to teach you how to ask good questions, and hence
mhm.
just make you a better data scientist.
Wow. Well, I think we had a fantastic conversation so far in this podcast. However, I have to end it soon. Uh, thank you for your time. However, uh, towards the end of my show, I always give 30 seconds to a minute
Right.
for my guests to kind of like talk about anything they want to talk about. So the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me. This has been great. I always love doing this kind of stuff. If you haven't noticed, I love to talk, so I'm glad that
Mhm,
you told me that it's over and we shouldn't go on for too long.
mhm,
My plug is that I talked about the global talent stream a little bit earlier.
mhm,
I really, really believe that Canada is a place to be for all technology folks.
mhm,
We have a great startup environment. We have a really, really good and innovative sort of economy, and
mhm,
we have all the right sort of ingredients. So, passion project for me on the side, apart from my full time job, is to create a platform that I've been working on that connects global talent with Canadian startups.
mhm,
We're called Codratics, so that's CODERATICS.
mhm,
It's in the works, so you're not going to find a lot of stuff out there if you go and search. But
mhm,
that's sort of my plug. It's more to come on it. We're building it out, and the idea here is to connect global talent with Canadian companies that are finding it hard, and Canadian startups that are finding it hard to attract kind of the kind of talent that they need.
mhm. Thank you, Harris.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
This is the end of the show. Thank you for tuning into the Pandemic Job Hunt podcast. As always, I would love to get feedback, so don't hesitate to get in touch through my Twitter at Andrew H. N. Barry or LinkedIn.